Okay, so one of the things that really stood out in my mind is, you go with what you know, and there's a lot of influence in the world, and if you want to succeed, if you want to make money, if you want a career, if you want an education, there's influences, and there's different people, different speakers. I was listening to a talk that Martin Luther King did, and because stigma is a big issue right now. It's on TV, it's in the media, there's a big push, and they're hijacking our language in recovery. And Martin Luther King was speaking about stigma, and the stigma was back then was about being black, and he was telling people to be proud of your heritage, your race, your color, be proud of yourself. And really the conversation was about what it's going to take to succeed in the world. And he said one of the most important things is not just dignity, but the dignity that you feel for yourself. And you think about, where do you get dignity? In the beginning, you get it from your family. You watch your mom and dad. In your community, different teachers. A lot of people, they've been affected by teachers and coaches, and somebody's pushed those buttons, and it adds up. Dignity adds up. A sense of yourself. And when you get into addiction, it removes your dignity. And in one way, you get the wrong kind of dignity. You become proud of addiction. You become proud. Like, I know guys that are angry, raging maniacs that are almost proud of the insanity that they were living in when I first meet them. I go, wow, you talk about using women with pride, and you talk about rejecting your family and your values, like it's moving you to a place of some kind of meaning in your life. And that all that stuff gets challenged in the beginning of recovery. And I tell you right now, in all the years I've been doing this, 35 years, no one has ever come up to me and thanked me for taking it easy on them. Hey man, you really took it easy on me. I want to thank you for that. Not the case. Like, I can actually be a little bit rough on people. It walks like a duck and talks like a duck. It's a fucking duck, like that. So the beginning's rough because you're sick and you're insane and you're angry and your defects are huge and they're running your life, and we know all that. And what we do is we create an environment that's as positive as we can make it. An environment where, when you eat dinner, you can appreciate the dinner. You can participate and help them cook it. You get to clean up afterwards. One of our philosophies became like, the house don't run if the dishes ain't done. Really complicated spiritual philosophy here, right? And next thing you know, you see a new guy washing the dishes, and he's smashing the dishes while he's washing them because he's angry and living in defects, and probably he's never washed dishes in his life. Like me, I would pay people to wash dishes. I'd be proud of it. I'd never wash a dish. I'd throw them in the garbage first. You know what I mean? And you think about that idea, where that moved me to in my life, a position of irresponsibility and insanity. And again, even in my own life, almost proud of some of the crazy shit that got me here in the first place. So there's that influence out there, like Martin Luther King was a big influence, and Martin Luther King Jr. was a big influence as well. And they started a movement, and that movement changed a country. Right? And you think about recovery, it's like a movement. At first, it's in your family, to where, how I explain it to parents sometimes, I'll be driving home, my kids are in addiction, I'm driving home, and I look and my kids are home, and I just keep driving. I don't even want to go in that house, because I don't want to live in that insanity. I don't want another argument. I don't want that pressure. Maybe I had a good or a bad day, but I've had enough for that day. I remember saying to my wife, like, why do we own anything? Because they steal everything we own. And I'll be mad all the time. I'll be worried the rest of the time. And then in between there, I get to be afraid, and it's pretty exhausting, How would I identify myself? My name's Dave and I'm an addict, Well, I tell you what, I'm also a person who works in a business of recovery. I'm also a person who has to participate in his own recovery to pull that off, right? And so, you have an identity in it. In the beginning, my identity, I just didn't want to be mad all the time. I just didn't want to be sick. I just didn't want to be like insane. I had gone insane. And so a lot of early recovery is this restoration to sanity. And the beginning is stop the damage. for anybody, for the family, for the addict, for each person on an individual basis to be able to just get a break. We've had guys come into treatment, the first thing their families do, they take a holiday. Like, I needed a holiday. They're off in Hawaii enjoying the sun, relaxing, and you're in treatment. You know, they get a break. They don't have to worry about you because you're in a safe place, like that. And I've had people do that and go away, and we don't see them sometimes for weeks, and they come back, and literally I've had moms and dads both say to me, they see their kid, and they go, wow, that's the first time I've actually looked in his eyes and saw him for a long time. Because he's been gone. One day I looked at my own kid and she was, who are you? I didn't recognize her anymore because that insanity was running her life. And I understand it because it's personal for me too. I understand my own insanity, but living through somebody else's insanity is a whole different story. And again, you need some help with it, right? So, I mean, as twisted as it seems, that being an addict becomes an identity. There's an identity in it. There's an identity in that anger. There's an identity in that pain. There's also an intimacy there. Like in a family, when you love your kid, there's an intimacy there. And who'd have ever thought all those years later that the biggest part of the intimacy now, it isn't love, it's pain. And that's a really intimate experience as well. And it can move you to another place. I'll tell you what, right now, looking back, that, surviving my addiction and going through it with my kids has moved me to a really good place in life. I don't regret it. You know what I mean? Like that movement, out of chaos and conflict, you end up with something pretty positive in your life, right? So when Martin Luther King was talking about dignity, when I meet guys and I talk to them on the phone, I'm not talking to anybody with any dignity. It's gone. And, so what's that restoration of sanity, and where's that dignity going to come from? Well, again, it's going to come from the other guys. Somebody remembering your name, somebody saying thank you, somebody taking you out for coffee, somebody getting you to a meeting, somebody sitting, and in some cases, sitting up with you all night. Like a guy will say, hey, I want to leave. And you go, why? I don't know. I know what that feels like. So to be able to sit with a guy at that moment and just say, hey, you know what? And somebody did it with me. It's like you just have a conversation. Next thing you know, I go, I still want to leave, but I'm tired. And the guy says, well, why don't you just go to sleep? And if you still want to leave, go tomorrow. Don't leave in the dark, in a dark and stormy night. You know what I mean? And it was like, yeah, by then I was tired and I wanted him to shut up and I went to sleep. I tell you what, I woke up the next day, one, I didn't want to leave. I didn't feel like using. I felt just a massive amount of gratitude for the time and energy that he had for me. Saved my life, like that. And it's the simple things. So we define our philosophy here with things like the coffee and the conversation. Like recovery sometimes is a coffee and a conversation, that you take the time for somebody. Somebody's listening when you talk. In kind, as you practice, next thing you know, you become the person who's listening. So when you're a parent, next thing you know, you're listening to some other parents. When you finally get to that place where you feel good and you're not afraid anymore, you're not living in that pressure, you're talking to somebody else who is, and you go, yeah, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be afraid like that. But you also are carrying that message and becoming that example of, hey, I'm not living in that fear anymore. I'm not living in that pressure. I'm not living in that insanity that was created by addiction in our lives, right? And it's not drug use. I mean, I think that's where a lot of places fall short. They want to solve that drug using problem. If it was just the drug, you would stop the person from using the drug, put them on some remote island, and then after a little while, look them in the eye. Okay, you're good to go. You've had that drug out of you long enough. As soon as you stop taking the drugs, all the reasons you were using them are there. And they're not all bad. Some it's like thrill seeking. Some of it's to have fun. Like there were good days doing it, and it's people who don't want to talk about that because that'll make you want to get loaded. It's not true. You got to talk about it all. Understand it for what it really is, that it filled in the gaps. What do you do with somebody when they say to you, the only thing keeping me alive is using? It's filled in the cracks. If I wasn't using, I'd probably kill myself. Yeah, you might think that way right now, but I tell you, after some good meals and some laughers and somebody caring about you, and this big thing happens, your heart starts to beat again. You start to feel again. You're not numb right now. You know, you become interested. You know, it starts to happen. I watch new guys do it. 30 days into it, they're laughing their heads off. You got to pull them off the ceiling to talk about them. They're so happy they could shit gratitude. You know, it's just like, well, why are you so happy? I don't know. You know, I don't know. My life is totaled, but I'm not in that pressure. I'm not going to get loaded tonight. I'm not going to leave tonight. You know, these guys eat dinner and they clap and cheer for the cooks, like, wow, yay. You know, it's just like, you know, at that moment you could appreciate eating. In addiction, like, I don't know, like, I don't eat anymore. I don't appreciate it anymore like that, you know? Especially if you're an alcoholic, it gets in the way, right? You know, one of them things I don't want to eat because it's going to ruin my high, you know? Like, so understanding what insanity is, why would talking about it make it better? It takes the pressure off. You know, if a guy gets the desire to use, you know, like in a relationship, we'll say to a guy, if you feel like using, I don't think it's a good idea to just tell your wife. She's going to freak. You know, maybe you should have a support group, you know, that can handle that. Hey man, I feel like using. They'll hang out with you. They'll be with you. They'll go through that. It'll go away. You know, from experience, you tell people that it's going to go away, you know, that like this can actually work, right? So getting through the misinformation, you know, when he was speaking about stigma, you know, I always laugh about this one. It's just like, you know what, I drink so much I fall down till I knock my teeth out. I'm bruised and battered. I could literally shit myself while I'm sitting here and I don't care. And they're talking about like stigma, like, you couldn't stigmatize me from that position? What? You're going to say something that's going to hurt my feelings? You know, like, it's complete insanity. Somebody says to me, you're going to die. I go, yeah, it's okay. That's not a bad idea. You should see how I feel. You know, like that's what that insanity of addiction is, more than just the drug use, right? You know, being pressed into this position to where all of a sudden suicide seems like a good idea, that I got to get as far away from my family as humanly possible, away from the people that love me, that could get in the way of this demise that's coming, you know. So that's why the restoration to sanity is family, is love, is community, you know, being a part of. And when somebody comes in and they spend a bit of time here, they get to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Next thing you know, they're involved in helping that next guy, and not long way down the road. It starts right away, and that brings them back to life, back to the values they have, you know, back to some dignity, integrity, and some morality. And you know, that all of a sudden a guy by 3 months in here has some dignity, you know, and you can see it, you know, like they look physically different. Well, they've eaten and slept, that helps too, you know. The new guy just shit himself in the shower, you know what I mean? It's just like, whoa, that's really impressive, you know. Like, what are you going to say to him? You know what, I'll go in there and clean it up. I don't care. You know, tell him it's going to be better tomorrow, you know, like that. So somebody saying to you it's going to be okay is a big deal. Somebody saying thank you is a big deal. It's a big deal in the beginning. The other night I went to a 12-year cake. Jared took a 12-year cake, and a couple of the guys that got up looked at him and said, hey, Jared, thank you. You know, that's a big deal. That has a lot of power, you know, and it has a lot of power just not for those two people, but for the new guys who are watching that. Just like, wow. And if he can do it, I can do it, you know, like that, you know, and not just stay clean for a couple of days. That's 12 years of doing it, you know, like it adds up. It has a lot of meaning. And I didn't raise that topic as an issue to create conflict or concern. I don't want to be at war with anybody. I think everything works, you know, we're pretty clear about what we're doing, but it's just like, you know, getting past those things when a guy like is almost proud that he's a thief, proud that he's a liar, you know, the guy who gets away with things, you know, hey, I'm genetically sneaky. I've heard every excuse in the world for a guy not to get well. And then what we want to do is we want to see a guy not bring this addiction into recovery, to bring those patterns and habits and excuses, you know. It's just like you take a look at it, you've been impacted and been hurt in a lot of cases, you know. Let's move forward. Let's get a new story, you know. Let's get that movement, you know, that they changed a country with that movement. When Rosa Parks wouldn't get up on that bus, it changed the whole country. But it wasn't that one act, it was that movement that started. And recovery was a movement. When I got clean, there was probably 25 people clean in the program I'm in Narcotics Anonymous, in this area. Maybe even in this country, you know, and there's thousands now. There's a movement happening to where, you know, recovery is acceptable, you know, that it's a positive thing, you know, it's, oh, don't say you're an addict. It's a positive thing, you know, that's part of my identity. I'm not ashamed of it, I'm proud of it. I'm ashamed of what I did while I was using, but I don't have to live in it, you know. I'm not proud of that. You know what I mean? I can tell that story, right? You know, but if you throw around that language and confuse that, a person's going to try move into recovery and not resolve those issues. All of a sudden, you know, you're going to be a clean horse thief, you know, as they used to say back in AA, right? You know, so we'll shoot a little higher, you know. So I think dignity is a very important quality for early recovery. And then anybody that's been clean a long time is going to tell you the same thing, that it's absolutely essential for long-term recovery. So there you go.
Perfect.